Our next column is the groupings column. This is a way for you to think about and visualize one very important aspect of classroom management, and that is your groupings. When are your students working individually in class, and when are they working in pairs? What activities work better in small groups, or when your class is divided into 2, 3, or 4 large teams? Or what activities should be done all together as the entire class? This idea is what we call your groupings. During every step of every activity, you can plan what sizes of groups your students will be in and how they will be seated in the room. The groupings you choose will determine a lot about the feeling of your lesson for your students, how interactive it is for them, who they get to work with, how much actual practice time they get, as well as a lot of the practical details for you, the teacher. What instructions do you need to give? Do you need to create space for them to line up in teams or stand in a circle, etc.? When I'm in the classroom and I'm giving my students instructions to begin the next activity, often the very first thing I need to know as the teacher is what groupings are we getting into? And I'll make that the first part of my instructions. So if my lesson plan says that we're discussing a question in pairs, then I'll begin my explanation with the grouping by saying, all right, in pairs, I want you to discuss this question. Or in small groups, I want you to do this exercise on page such and such. Or if I need everyone to move around and get into a completely different configuration than they are in at the moment, I'll typically give them those instructions first. I'll get them into their groupings around the room, and then I'll give them the instructions for the activity. As much as possible, you should use a variety of groupings throughout your lesson. Groupings are not meant to be an afterthought, but instead play an important part of how you plan your activities. So we want you to really think about these. And as the course progresses, we'll give you more tips about how to choose effective groupings and seating arrangements for your activities. We also want you to add a grouping for every activity in your lesson from start to finish. Many activities have 2 or 3 different groupings. For example, the teacher might address the class during the explanation. Then the students work in small groups while doing the activity, and then the teacher has individual students report back to the entire class to summarize the activity. You can use abbreviations or simple code for these groupings, but try not to use very ambiguous codes that another teacher or assessor will not be able to recognize or understand. We recommend these common groupings as an example: individuals, pairs, small groups, larger groups, which might also be 2, 3, or 4 large teams, the whole class, the teacher addressing the class, or a student addressing the class. Now, of course, you might find some of your own unique ways of grouping your students, but we do recommend this list of common groupings that we often see and recommend. And of course, make sure the groupings are aligned with the correct corresponding activity, that they're not too far up or down the page.